Inspired by nature, created by Katie. Hi, everybody. Welcome to my channel. I'm Creative Katie, Karen Burchill. Let's get started. People often ask, where do I get inspiration? Well, Mother Nature is a great source of inspiration. These daffodils are now blooming on Vancouver Island. And so once I came back from my walk, I decided I'm going to do something with daffodils. In my stash, I think I got this stamped image from in Happy Mail. I'm not even sure how I got it, but I cut it out. It's a little daffodil girl. I don't know what the name of this stamp is. If you know, please let me know in the comment section below. I think there's a whole series of these kind of stamps. I used my X-Acto knife to cut out the hard part, and then I went through my napkin stash to look for, well, daffodils, because that's what's inspired me. Now, these daffodils, the flowers are a little bit big to go with that stamped image. This one, oh, I like how this goes. This would make a nice Insta background, but I want to do a little bit more work and have fun. This napkin, all these napkins come from NINNYSNAPKINS.com, and there's a wide variety of spring napkins. So if you can't find this one, you'll find one that you're going to love, guaranteed. And then there's this napkin. I like this one, so I just cut out one panel, and this is going to help me figure out the composition. If I kind of butt that girl up to this one, I like how the stalks go with her long legs. Let's talk about what we're going to create on. This is my 7x10 Canson Mixed Media page, and this gives me lots of real estate at the top. I can have my focal image, combined focal image down below, and up top I can do a lot of stuff. But today I am going to work on a canvas panel. These are sturdy, they're easy to work on, relatively inexpensive. And this is an 8x10, so it's a slight bit bigger than the art journal page, but you can do this on any substrate, on any product. So I'm wearing my latex glove there because my wound from my hand surgery is still not a 100% healed, so I want to protect the wound. It makes it a little awkward to create. I peel off those excess layers, and now I'm going to cut off some of this napkin. I don't want all of it. I'm setting up a new composition combining this stamped image with the napkin. So I'm going to edit out those parts of the napkin that I do not want. And the easiest way of doing that is to use a liner brush with a little bit of water. I just put the water there and then it just comes off. It gives you that deckled edge, which really disappears. You don't see that harsh edge. You can use scissors, but if you're going to use scissors, cut it before you peel off the excess layers. It'll just be that much easier to handle. This gets very, very flimsy when you take off the excess layers. So I'm just working away, cutting off what I do not want for the composition that I'm setting up. With this one, I have a pretty good idea of where I want to go on the page. I don't always. Sometimes you put down the napkin and then you say, oh, well, can I add a printable or something else? And then there's other ways of dealing with it. So this had some stamp script on it. That was a failed attempt at doing something weeks and weeks ago. And I don't care if the script shows through. In fact, I'm open to that, but I don't want it right under where the napkin's going to be. And I don't want it as strong as it is. So I'm giving it a coat of gesso. Once that's completely dry, I'm gluing down my napkin. Now, part of this daffodil is white. I don't want any color behind it. I want to keep it white, which is why I'm gluing it down now before I colorize the background. I'm just using fluid matte medium, gluing it down. Now I want to add some texture and pattern. So I grabbed this. It's called Tile Mania. It's a very fine pattern. It's a 6-inch. It's from the Crafter's Workshop. And I'm putting their modeling paste through this stencil in about 3 areas. And I know where I'm going to put things, so I know where to avoid it, and the napkin's already there. Now I could have chosen to colorize my background and then put on the modeling paste. The modeling paste would be white on a slightly colored background. It gives a slightly different effect. So you can change up the order that you put them in. I'm just putting that girl where she is. I don't want a lot of texture underneath her. So I'm just going to put it where I don't think she's going to be. There's a little bit excess. You can always scrape off if it overlaps in a place that you don't want. Modeling paste, you can take that X-Acto knife and scrape it back, even once it's dry. My plan for this texture application is that it shows a little bit, but it's not going to be really upfront. And there you can see the texture that that's going to add. So again, time has been taken to completely dry it. You can use the heat tool or not. And here I'm going to use 3 things to colorize the back: unbleached titanium, cadmium yellow, and my white gesso. I want a very light background. I'm including the cadmium yellow because that yellow is in that daffodil, and I plan to put it in my stamped image as well. I'm making it very mottled, no solid color. If it's too dark with the unbleached titanium or too much yellow, I can go back and add white. I just want very faint background. I'm using the brush to get in and around the napkin area, because if I have that unbleached titanium, I need at least some of that in those spaces between the stalks where the napkin is. So I'm just using a brush to get in there and rubbing it a little bit with my finger. Adding the unbleached titanium, when I go over the textured area, it brings that up a little bit more. It's still very light, very tone on tone, but it does bring out that textured area. I hope you can see that right now so that you can know. Just adding a little bit more in and amongst the leaves and the stalks. So what inspires you? Where do you get your inspiration? Where do you get the start of your page? Let me know in the comment section below. So you can see the texture is brought out a little bit more, but it's not in your face. And kind of the patterning of that texture, the stencil that I chose, works well with the shape of the daffodils. Here I'm adding the cadmium yellow and just a little bit. And boy, oh, I loved how this just brightened it. This is something I really haven't done. I was a little leery about putting the yellow, but as long as I was light-handed and just a wisp of yellow in there, it just brought out the yellow that was in the daffodils, which is what I wanted to do. If you have a color somewhere, you want to have it somewhere else on the page, in the background, in the other focal image. And that makes for a very cohesive page when all is said and done. So I am very, very happy with that background, with the wisp of yellow in there. It just brightened it up. My goal, of course, is to make it light and springy. That's the whole theme of it. Like, now I'm just adding little bits of white, knocking back some of that yellow where I'm thinking it might be just a little bit too strong. And then, of course, giving it a good dry in between layers. Now I want to add a little more interest to the background, so I grabbed this grid stamp. This is a Stamperia Create Happiness set, and I'm just using archival ink and stamping. It's kind of that hashtag, so it's working well with the Tilemania stencil. Remember, you want all your components to play nice together. This is adding a little bit of black, which you do see that black in the leaves. Now, every time I add a layer, it pushes back what's behind it. And I'm even stamping some on the napkin. That's, again, making it work all together. So it doesn't look like you've just had something and glued a napkin on it. Now I grabbed my lid and I'm using yellow oxide, getting the paint on the lid and just adding these marks, these circular marks. Now, why circular? Well, if you look at the center of the daffodil, it's round. And I just wanted to bring out that. And I wanted to bring that yellow oxide, deep yellow, into my background in another way. You can use that with any lid. So I collect my lids. I save them out of the recycle bin and I use them to make marks. And again, I'm going over top of some of the napkin there a little bit as well. And my girl can go there. It looks like she's going, ta-da, which is the feeling that I want to go with. So again, everything gets dried in between. I'm taking some of that yellow oxide and I'm edging my canvas panel. Just kind of finishes it off, whether you edge it with a color or black. And I do both because I like that two-tone kind of look. And my girl can go there. I did not like that circle where it was with the positioning of my girl. So once it was dry, I'm just putting some gesso on it and then I'm repainting it with the unbleached titanium and the yellow and what I did to colorize the background. So if something ends up where you don't want it, gesso is your friend. And I can easily do that because everything I've used here is permanent. So it takes me a couple coats. I dry in between until that ring just disappears. Now I grabbed out my Inktense blocks and you see I've swatched them out. That allows me to see what colors. And I am over painting on the napkin. So the basic process here is I put a little bit of gesso where I'm going to colorize it. And then I come in with a color medium. In this case today, I'm using my Inktense blocks, which are ink, not watercolor. They are permanent when dry. Now, you can't really tell in the picture, but the leaves here have almost a teal tone to it. And I want to not have that. I want more olive green. And so I'm using a variety of the greens in my Inktense set and mixing it up and just basically changing the color of the greenery on this napkin to a tone that I like better. So I'm using their basic drawing, but I'm changing the colors. And this is kind of a step-by-step process. I don't have a definite plan of this. I'm kind of put gesso, then I add color, I add another color. I might go back with more gesso. You could do the same thing with acrylic paints, overpainting. When I use acrylic paints, I often water them down somewhat. This makes takes the napkin from just plain decoupage to bumping it up where it looks, someone looks at it and they wonder, was that a napkin or did she paint it? Because you get that texture from it. So again, I'm using a variety of the greens, dropping it in, and I just wet my brush, rub on like you do watercolor. It's just once it's dry, it's not going to smear. So when I varnish this, I don't have to worry that any of this is going to reactivate, smudge, and wreck what I've worked hard to build up. When you're doing home decor pieces like this and you know you're going to varnish them, that is an important consideration. If I was doing this in an art journal page, it could be watercolor because I don't varnish my art journal pages. And you just have to remember not to wet it afterwards or you risk moving it. So now I'm getting quite happy with what I've got going on there. And now I'm going to work on the daffodils themselves. I like the white of the daffodils, like my inspiration picture that I took on my walk. I'm just adding some gesso here, and then I'm going to colorize these daffodils as well. This really brightens it up, adds texture because I'm really globbing on the gesso. I don't try to make it perfectly smooth or cover the entire petal. And then I'm going to use some of that yellow to just highlight and brighten up the yellows that are there. Remember, this is my focal point, so I don't want it too faded. So I'm working with the colors that are already in the napkin and just enhancing them to some degree. I'm adding in some of the line work and the shading that I can see in the napkin. So I'm using it as a guide. I don't have to recreate the wheel. I can get it jump started by what others have given me and then make it my own. And when I'm colorizing, I just jump from, oh, I know to do this. And then I'm thinking I'll do something else that I know to do and just keep going around. Overpainting, I think, is a really great way of really making it your own. And I like the effect. But if you don't want to overpaint, you can leave the napkin as it is. It's beautiful by itself. So then I take some yellow oxide and I am splattering. Why yellow oxide? Because that orange, deep brown, orangey color is in those daffodils, and I want to include it in my background. Again, everything needs to work together. And splattering is a very easy way of including that color into your background without too much effort or too much work. So I am loving how this has all come together. Once that's all dry, the splatters take a little bit of drying to do before you want to make sure you give it that drying time. Now I'm going to use gel medium from the Crafter's Workshop and glue down my stamped image, this little daffodil girl. I'm putting a good coat underneath and on top. I want to turn this into a non-porous surface, so it will take whatever color medium I want to give it. While that's continuing to dry, I am going in with some black, some yellow oxide, and adding some shading to my leaves and my daffodils. This, along with the overpainting, just really allows you to see your focal image more. And to do my shading, as usual, I'm using one of my angle brushes. I don't spend a lot of money on the brushes that I put my gel medium and gesso on, but I do spend a little bit of money on getting a good angle brush because, well, I add shading and highlighting on every page, and a good angle brush comes in handy. So now I want to start colorizing my stamped image. And I'm always a little nervous about coloring, making those color choices. So I start with what I know for sure I want to do. So I'm using that yellow oxide that's in the daffodil that I splattered in the background for her hair. And I like how that ties everything together. I do not want to use colors that aren't already present. So I'm just grabbing the right size brush. This was a small round here to put in the hair. I know I'm going to come back and I'm going to shade, and that's going to add a lot more interest. But right now I'm just concentrating on getting the base color. Trying to decipher what's hair, what's not hair here, what is my stamped image. Now, I could have put a magazine picture here. I could have used a Julie Nutting doll where I, made a daffodil skirt of some sort or used one of those bigger daffodils from a different napkin. Then I use a flesh tone right out of the bottle. This is just craft paint. And you can buy the craft paint in various um, skin tones. And I just find it easier than not having to mix it. So anytime I do a Julie Nutting doll or I need a skin tone, I just grab that one bottle and I don't have to start mixing paint. But you can totally mix paint to get a flesh tone that you like and want to use. I've just decided that's her ear. I was kind of wondering what that was. Now, I could have used my Pit Brush markers to colorize this. You could use whatever coloring you like. I prefer using acrylic paint and painting it on. That's just the way I roll. So again, if you know what company or the name of this stamped image is, let me know in the comment section. I think it's just absolutely adorable. And I know I've seen some on Pinterest and different ones where there's different flowers. So it must be a whole series. Now for her daffodil dress, I am using the yellow oxide. Why? Because that is the color that is in the napkin. So I'm just putting the base color on here. My brush was a little too small, so I grabbed an angle brush. Again, I love using angle brushes for putting that base coat. It gets in all those nooks and cranny. It just seems easier to use than a flat brush for this application. And again, I know I'm going to come back and do some shading and add some interest to the skirt. Right now, I'm just focused on getting a good base color. If I had used one of that other napkin where I said the daffodils were too big, they had some pink ones and some peach colored ones. I would have changed the skirt to match the napkin there. Once everything's dry, the frill around her neck, I want to keep it white, but I want to add a little bit more interest. So I grabbed my white pearl stencil butter and I've thinned it down. And when you thin it down, you can use it just like acrylic paint. Yes, I can put it through a stencil. So it's like modeling paste. You can put it through a stencil to make texture, but you can also thin it down and paint like I'm doing here. The stencil butters have this iridescent pearlized look, and I wanted that little extra bling, a little extra something added, but I did want to keep it white. Then I'm just adding it to the whites of the other elements in the stamped image. Now, that was a little too flat, so I'm taking it now on a paintbrush right out of the jar, and I'm kind of stippling, and that's giving some texture to this frill. So now I have the pearlization, the color, and it's texturized. So in the close-ups at the end, you'll be able to see that. It's a very slight difference. You could pick whichever one you like best. But I've showcased two ways of using stencil butters here where you're not putting it through a stencil and using it like modeling paste. So the stencil butters have other uses. There you go. Then I'm taking black and I'm edging. This ties in with the black shading that I've done, we're over the napkin. And it further frames everything. Kind of defines the page or the project. Now I'm still using the black with my angle brush and I'm shading around my girl to make her stand out a little bit more from the background. And then I'm adding some shading on the dress there. I just work my way around. I had painted over the eyes and now I'm just using my stylus with some black acrylic paint to put the eyes back on. Now I want to put my sentiment on, and while I could have used through the Garden Gate sentiment pack where I have tons of great quotes that would work with this, I just really think she's just saying ta-da, hello spring. So I used my letter wood stamp and I stamp it out on paper to get the positioning, and then I just use black acrylic paint on the blending foam and stamp. If I make a mistake, I am able to erase it because it's acrylic paint and then restamp it. And you see me cleaning my stamps after I put the acrylic paint on. I'm not looking for it to be perfectly straight. I'm not looking for it to be perfectly stamped. There, I made a mistake. It didn't quite stamp properly. I didn't press hard enough. So I was able to take it back because everything's permanent underneath, remember? And then I can continue stamping out my word. If I stamp with archival ink, if I make a mistake, I'm pretty much stuck with it, which is why I choose to use acrylic paint here. So my sentiment just, hello spring. Seems to be what she's doing. This is going to sit in my entryway, on my entryway console and stuff, and I can swap it out with the seasons. I want to make a series of at least 4. Just thought I needed a little bit of script. So I have the black acrylic paint on my blending foam. I'm putting it on this script stamp and just adding one more element. Going over the napkin, over the girl a little bit, into the background. Sometimes you're not done when you think you're done. And I'm just using the paint that's on that blending foam and just going around painting the side of my canvas board. Then I decided, oh, I need a little bit more bling. So I'm splattering with my gold paint. This is just regular Liquitex Basic gold paint that has been thinned in order to get the right consistency of splatters. And since I do so much splattering, I just have a tub of black, white, and gold, always at the ready. I'm very, very happy with how this turned out. You can see the texture, all the elements are working together. Success. Now, what do I varnish with? I use Minwax polyacrylic varnish in satin, and I give it 1 or 2 coats. But I'm going to let the acrylic paint cure for, at least overnight. And then this is called a format frame. It has some plexiglass, but you can insert it from the front, and it's a little bit of a frame. And what I typically do is I will create on an 8x10, and then I can swap it out with the seasons. One frame does it all. Thank you for joining me. Check the description box. I'll link those format frames for you if I can find them on Amazon. Until next time, take a walk in nature, get inspired, and get creative.